Uh, my name is Reid Hansen, and I'm the tour guide. I've been doing this for a number of years, and my son is with me. Son Jeff is with me. We're stopping at and getting out and walk at 2 and 3 places, and we're going to hit at least 20 places. You have a map. You have the brochure there. And we're going to use this as we go along because I'm going to point out where we're going to be and talk about each one. And like I say, we're going to get out and walk a couple of times at the Japanese Memorial and at Port Blakely. We have Lily Kadama with us, who was in the Japanese Memorial. And I was in the 7th grade when all this took place.
Wow. On the island here?
On the island here, because I grew up on the island from age 1. I'm 94 years old, and so lived all this period of time. And I'm going to have Lily say a few things as we go along when we get there. And so one thing, if you happen to look at page in the back of the thing, picture number 23.
Oh my gosh.
There were two families that were here, Hansen and Grow, each had 160 acres here in Winslow, so they pretty much took up all of Winslow. And so that's kind of what Winslow Way looked like back in the day, as we say. There was no ferry boat to go to, so.
Yeah.
How did they get around? Because there wasn't any bridge either.
Oh no, that didn't go until 1950. We're going to talk about the steamers and the ferry boats as we go along at different places. Vancouver came off of Bainbridge Island with his ships. They stayed out at Restoration Point. Restoration Point was named because of the restoration of the monarchy in England. Captain Wilkes came in 1840 something, and each one of them named places. Wilkes was from Boston, so he named places like from presidents like Madison, Jefferson, and so forth. And, Vancouver, his lieutenant was named Puget, and he named Puget Sound among other places. So I think we're ready to go.
Okay.
Yeah, in the 70s, they named all the streets because before then we had rural route box numbers. I remember ours was 98. Wyatt Way was named the house on the corner was where the Wyatts lived, and he was a ferry boat captain. I remember him, as well as his son. And but now the whole road all the way down is Wyatt Way. There were big strawberry fields. The Lily Kadama family had a big strawberry field.
Oh, my
Grandparents. We're down at the strawberry cannery on Weaver Road. If you look at the picture, you can see ladies look like they're playing with strawberries there, trying to cast out the bad ones. When we pick strawberries, as I did when I was a kid, you picked them depending what they wanted, if they wanted the stems on or the stems off, and the stems on went to the stores, the stems off came here to the cannery because they didn't, when they squashed the berries, they didn't want the stems on, obviously.
Were they the Marshall strawberry?
Marshall strawberry. Yeah, my aunt worked down here at the strawberry plant. Okay, later on I was gone, 60s or 70s, I forget when they built up, put offices and so forth. Then it burned down. And
That was the 80s, wasn't it?
80, maybe
Yeah.
it was the 80s.
It was the 80s.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't come back to the island until 85. I was taught school in Bellevue for 30 years.
Yeah, one of my kids used to take piano lessons in the old strawberry plant.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was in the 50s. A man named Weaver. That's the road is named after him. Was he made a concrete plant in this area? So, at the end of Wyatt Way, this hill we're coming to was always called Brooks Hill. That was before it we had any names for any roads. So if somebody wanted to go to Winslow, you go to Books Hill and go straight ahead. Anyway, it was named Books Hill because the books lived at the bottom of the hill. When you got them all rounded up and they come down Taylor Avenue to get on the ferry that was waiting for them, all the families came down, and Lily's going to point out where her family is.
So you're at a historic spot because this is the very first location where people of Japanese descent were taken away. And this is my mother holding my baby sister who was 9 months old. And this is my aunt. This is Kanako. And this is me with the birds in my hair holding my little brother who was 2. And there's a larger photo of this at the Historic Museum. I don't know if it's still there, but I was a docent there years ago, and it was a group of school children who came, and I pointed myself out with a pointer, and this one school child said, "Oh, you're a historic artifact." I think that sounds better than senior citizen. I'm an artifact.
Yeah.
So, Lily, do you remember what your mama told you when you were walking down the ramp? Did you know what was ahead of you?
What she told me the night before. She said, tomorrow we're going to go to Seattle. It'll be like a vacation. And in those days, I mean, it was as if Mama said, tomorrow we're going to Disneyland. I mean, I remember being so excited I couldn't sleep. I was so looking forward to the next day to take the ferry to come here and see all the other people, my aunts and my cousins and soldiers with real guns. I mean, I was 7, and I just thought, so, in those days, I think children as young as 7 know what's going on in the big world. But we didn't have television, we didn't have Google, and we were protected. But then we got on a train. I'd never been on a train before, and so I'm often asked, about this, and I know it's because our mothers were trying to make life as normal as possible. But eventually I did stay there for kind of vacation.
And then how long were you in Manzanar? Did you go to Minidoka then after that?
Well, before the year was over, the majority of the Bainbridge families asked to be transferred to Minidoka. You have to realize there were 10 of these camps constructed because they were going to imprison 110,000 people. I mean, and where are they going to put them? I mean, just imagine the country building actually jails, or actually we call American concentration camps. But eventually they did build 10, and Minidoka was the last one to be built. And I think the islanders thought, oh, it's in the Northwest, it's in Idaho. And they thought maybe it's better, it'll be more like here. But when we thought there, it was the exact same. All 10 camps are in the same kind of environment, the middle of nowhere. That was one of the reasons, but there were other reasons too, but I won't take that to talk about.
Yeah, thank you. We're going to go down the wall and walk along. Like I said, I was 13 at the time, and all the people are names and families and the ages of them. If they're 12 or 13, I was in school with them, and I remember it well.
Do you know how to find it?
You want to say something about how many people or about what this means as far as length is concerned?
The ball, 276 feet long. It's a foot for every person of Japanese descent who was here on the island. That's babies all the way up to senior citizens. And he made the wall curving because he said this is a life event and life does not go in a straight line. He wanted to make sure that there was gravel so people could hear the footsteps going down. Be removed. in Japan, and they couldn't get back. But the others were men who were arrested earlier by the FBI, who had come to the farms and went all up and down the West Coast. The FBI went to homes. And this is after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. I think this was in February. And many of the farmers were arrested because when they went to the farms, all the farmers owned rifles. It was to hunt for food. It was not for self-defense. And they had shortwave radios because they were listening to news in Japan. And the other was they had found dynamite.
Oh, that's for the stumps.
Right, and so because many of the farmland, because a long time ago, none of these trees existed. It was all mostly farmland because most of the farmers who originally worked at the mill became farmers. And to clear the land, they had to clear the land of these humongous old growth tree stumps, which are 6 and 8 feet in diameter, and you can dig them out, or you could have horses or oxen pull them out. And the irony is the government issued leftover dynamite from World War I to help the farmers clear the land. But what the government found was dynamite, rifles, and most of them, they were not citizens. They were here from the late 1800s, early 1900s, but they couldn't become naturalized citizens even if they wanted to, because the government did not allow people of Japanese to even apply for citizenship until 1952.
Wow.
But anyway, so they were arrested and taken away even before we were, the rest of us were. So that makes up the 50 who did not actually walk this walk, but they could not return. They were not allowed to come back to the ground of West Coast.
This represents the right up to the day they were going to be leaving, and the Bainbridge High baseball coach, who happened to be my baseball coach, a year or two later, let all the kids that were Japanese play in the game, and there was their last game before they left.
And they were not first string.
That's what that was. Lily Kitamoto, age 7.
Wow. Stay there. Stay there, Lily.
I can only imagine some of the things you guys saw in the
Yeah. One thing I learned how to do was make my bed every day. Toshiko Yukawa, I think of it, all of a sudden I go back to grade 1, sitting around in the little green chairs in a reading room. We started first grade together. And I hadn't seen her for a number of years. She's still living in Seattle. We have to be the same age.
That were rounded up on the West Coast, the Bainbridge experience was different because they went straight to the court. Other people on the West Coast were held in assembly centers, which was a euphemism for parenthood.
I have a picture of it here, picture number 3. Just want to mention a couple things. It was one of the big industries here. 20 years ago or so, they decided creosote wasn't a good thing, so it stopped. But anyway, it made railroad ties for all over the country. Panama Canal also. When I was going to school in 1952, in the summertime, they hired a bunch of us to go down and peel logs. And they gave us a spud and a double-bitted axe and said, go to it, and you got 4 cents a foot.
Oh my gosh.
And tuition at the UW was only $75 a quarter, so I could make enough money to go to school. Oh yeah, picture number 4, we're gonna go along Rockaway Beach, and they built Yukon River boats along the shore, and then they shove them into the water. We were up at Denali, up at the Yukon a couple years ago, and we have a couple of them up there for tourists on the river. When we go up this steep hill, it's called Hall's Hill. Hall, H-A-L-L, Hall's Hill. The Hall brothers built sailing ships at the end of Fort Blakely Harbor. They built 3, 4, and 5 masted ships like sailboats, like sailboats have. But they were faster and they took a smaller crew. They took almost 70 or 80 men on a crew to sail the old boats with the 4-masted sails, where the ones that they were building here, they only need about a dozen for raising the sail. That's why this is called, and they were the Hall brothers who built the ships. It's hard to believe that all this was there at one time.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Keep going. The mill burned down 3 times. Each time they rebuilt the mill, they rebuilt the last one at the turn of the century. It was a mill up until 1922. It started, Britain came in here in 1864 because he found that this was a deep water port. Before that, he tried to have the mill over at Alki Point. Too much wind for the ship. Then he went over to Enetai by Bremerton, and he had to fight Rich Passage. That didn't work. So then he finally found this place in 1864 and built his mill, thousands and thousands of board feet. All the old growing trees came from Bainbridge Island, and then eventually all over Puget Sound. Loggers would go out and cut, and they'd make floats or booms out of logs and bring them into here. Look over here. That's where they brought the logs, because when we get up at the point there, they could bring the logs in here at high tide and then cut it off, and that's where they wanted the logs at high tide to stay there. If they put them out here, sometimes they'd be down in the mud, but over here they'd all be floating. And you can see that in the picture. That building was built for the high school kids to write graffiti on. The third mill was electrified, and that's what that was for.
On picture 7.
Picture number 7. Yama. You don't know, Yama was a town that the Japanese built to live in, and they had stores and everything to work in the mill, and that's what they were doing. And I believe we're right above it. I think when the mill closed in the 1920s, early 1920s, people moved out and bought land. That's how we got all of the farms, the strawberry farms and so forth, because the mill quit and they didn't have any job to go to. So
When did the mill quit?
1922. Then when the war started in Pearl Harbor, that's when the Japanese were removed, and then the Filipinos helped keep a lot of the strawberry fields, a lot of the farms, and some of us did the same. Some of them paid their taxes and so forth. Bainbridge was probably a better place to come back to than most places. It really was. Okay, we're going to move on through Fort Ord. The Petersons had a dairy farm here, Sunny Hill Dairy, big dairy farm. And Judith Peterson was in my class in the 6th grade, 7th grade, and she came to school one day and said the Navy's taken our farm. And so the Navy or the army rather, confiscated the whole dairy farm, made them sell, made them get out, get rid of the cows, burn some of the buildings, and so that was the end of their dairy farm. Yeah.
Well, that was one of the reasons people think Bainbridge Islanders were the first to be taken away because of Fort Ward. The Navy had a secret operation going there. There was a leftover radio tower from World War I that was able to receive signals from Japan, and the Navy was operating a secret, was doing a secret operation where they were training people to intercept those signals, and it was here at Fort Ward. And so the government couldn't talk about that because it was secret.
Right.
But that's probably one of the reasons they were worried about Japanese here on the island.
Yeah.
That might be another reason they chose people here to be dangerous.
Right. And they were teaching the code, and they knew the Japanese code, which happened later on in the Battle of Midway. But yeah, it was. But anyway, they did take their farm and they moved out. And never saw them again. I saw Judy, about 20 years ago. But otherwise, that's Linwood Center. It was Emanuel Olson built it in 1934, 35, 36. And that's the only part was there. They built it Tudor style because she was from England. They wanted to look like with Tudors.
Yeah.
If you look at picture number 11, Pleasant Beach School was,
You in this picture?
yeah, that was Pleasant Beach School in 1935, yeah. Anyway, later on it was turned into a home for elderly people called the Serenity House, and then it was torn down in the late 40s. Anyway, yeah, okay, I'm in that picture, front row, second from the right.
I thought it was
It was
Serenity House.
Yeah.
It was actually.
There was an earthquake in 1949, and that's when the school closed. Yeah, it was Serenity House too. Yeah, later.
Yeah.
Okay, Lily went to the school also,
Are you're
and you notice there's a big rock there. There's a crack in the rock, and Lily tells a story about getting her shoe caught in the rock. Go ahead, tell.
Well, at recess, that was one of the things we did at recess was to climb that rock. And then the bell rang, recess was over, and so we have to go back to our classroom, but my shoe was caught. I couldn't get my shoe out, but I had to go back to my classroom, so I unlaced my shoe, left my shoe there in the crack, and I ran back to my classroom. But then when school was over, we took a school bus to come here, and I ran up to that rock and got my shoe, and I had to hurry to catch the bus before it left without me, because otherwise I would have to walk all the way home to Pleasure Lake. But I made it, and I was so relieved. I always remember that rock because of that shoe.
You had to be in the 6th grade to eat lunch on the rock.
So, Reid, how much was the matinee down here at the theater?
11 cents.
Oh my God! I remember that.
Oh, I mentioned Toshiko at the end. She's
Turn left here.
Yes.
she's in the front row, right in the middle. All the lumber was kept on the south shore, and Louis Larson was in charge of the lumber. When the mill closed, he brought a lot of the lumber over here, and that was his lumber yard there we just passed. Then we'll go up along Crystal Springs and stop at the ferry pier, talk about the automobile ferry to Bremerton, talk about the steamers that my mother came ashore on to meet my dad. No, in there, there's an empty lot. If you picture number 13, Captain Swenson came from Sweden about 1885. He had 3 daughters, and they were living here, 3 daughters. Over the years, he had 4 more daughters.
Wow.
7 daughters altogether. He had 40 acres here, all along the road. And he gave each daughter a piece of land to build a house. And they each built a house along here. In fact, Sadie was one of them, and she and my great uncle were married. I'll point that out. Number 14. The Lindquist had 30 acres along here. The house on the left was the Lindquist house, as well as the one down further. In 1940, when the war started, the state wanted land to build a ferry, and so he sold this part here for a parking lot, and that the beach and that for a pier for this ferry on number 14. The pier, this is just a fishing pier. It's the same place as the pier here, but the pier for the ferry was about 3 times as long and about 4 times as wide.
Yeah.
And the ferry Rosario ran back and forth to Bremerton about 10 times a day. Take shipyard workers. My mother worked in the Navy shipyard during the war, and she wasn't a riveter, she was an office lady. But anyway, I remember it well. I had my first job in 1945 in Bremerton in a bakery. I'd catch the last ferry back over to Bremerton at night, work in the bakery all night, and then catch the first ferry back in the morning. We just lived a few houses up the road. So anyway, in 1950, when the bridge went in, the ferry quit. And now you drive 40 miles around to Bremerton.
Yeah, right.
You say that's a fishing pier now?
Yes, a fishing pier or
Or public or?
public. This whole beach is public. Yeah.
Yeah.
My Jeff's wife, my daughter-in-law, and friend jump off the end of the pier and swim every day, almost every day. Or every
Wow.
other day. It was a great place to live. We had 10 acres here. My grandparents' house was over there. We had a farm up and back with a horse and a cow and a barn and so forth. Yeah. We could get out for a minute.
What about mosquito boats?
If you look up the way, you see the white buildings up there. That's Keyport, where during the war they made torpedoes. Torpedo, not the explosive, but the torpedo, and they'd send them down every now and then to test the motors, and every now and then one would end up on the beach, and the guys they come down with the tugboats to tell us kids to get the hell off the beach, and we told them we didn't want to. I don't think we did. But anyway, so they got the torpedoes back, and so we used to sleep on the beach as kids now and then our captain of the ferry boat, Ed Johnson, was a friend of ours, and he would honk the horn at the last trip, and we'd run down, and he'd let us stand up in the pilot house, going over to Bremerton and back. We thought we were big deals here in the ferry. These two pilings is where the mosquito fleet docked. Gibson Landing is what it was called. And Captain Gibson, who lived a couple houses up, built the dock. We call it Gibson Landing. And it was going till about 1928, just before I was born. And my mother came ashore. My aunt had met my mother in Seattle and brought her ashore to meet my dad. And they got married in 1927, 28. I was born in 29. Yeah. When my grandfather came here and bought the land, the 10 acres, he brought 3 brothers and a sister. One sister was left in Wisconsin.
And his mom.
Huh?
And his mother.
Yeah, and his mother. Yeah, his mother. Right. Reid. Anyway, he brought his future wife with him. So to get married, they rowed the boat up to Port Orchard. Rowed like this.
Oh my.
They got married up there, and I still have all the paperwork and all that. Yeah, 3 of us were graduating from UW in '52, probably before some of you were born. And we decided to come over to the island to go to the dance hall at Fletcher Bay and dance with some young ladies. And we got there, and everybody was accounted for. And So we headed up for another place we thought was a dance hall at Hamsville, and we went up there and we pulled in. We found it, went in, and there were three young ladies sitting there without anything to do. And,
So you thought.
so we, we asked one of the young ladies to dance, and her name happened to be Barbara. And, this was April, and in January we were married. Where the steamers landed are road ends, and they're supposed to be sort of a park or a way to get to the beach, but it's not easy. This is a road end here. If you look at picture number 17, this dock used to be there. So you catch a steamer here to go different places. One steamer did not go all around the island. There was a series of docks, and they just went from maybe 2 or 3 docks. When the steamers quit in about 1940, they had a small car ferry here. It held about 6 cars, and my dad and I and kids who wanted to go, we would pack up the car and come up here and catch the ferry over to Brownsville. Get off at Brownsville, drive to Seabeck, catch the ferry from Seabeck over to Brennan, and then you'd be at the base of the mountains, Dotsey Wallace River. And so then we go hiking we'd take off and hike for a week or 2 weeks and have a lot of fun. My dad was a great hiker, knew the mountains, and we went with kids and big time. Yeah, we drank water out of the river and out of the lakes. We didn't have bottled water, but didn't worry about it. We're both at Rolling Bay. They built Bay Hay and Feed. They had a big store there. We used to deliver groceries by wheelbarrow in the area, and it's really growing. And they're trying to, make it like a Linwood Senate or Winslow eventually. Anyway, you probably buy the sweatshirts at Bay Hay and Feed with the animals on them and that sort of thing.
Tell about the map.
So anyway, we're going to go on to one more stop that I'll talk about, and then we'll go home. Right? Anyway, if you picture number 21, it doesn't look like that anymore.
No, it doesn't.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the Omaha cabin. In the mid-30s, the WPA built the cabin, 1934, I think. And in 1940, 41, I was a Boy Scout in the cabin. We had a scout troop, and that was our home for scouting. And then in 1941, 42, the war came along, and the Army kicked us out. They wanted the cabin and they wanted the grounds because there were some gun emplacements on the island during that time. 105 howitzers, and they had a couple different places. Anyway, moving ahead a lot of years, about 10 years ago, it was really in disrepair, and the park department wanted to tear it down. And so my friend Jerry Elfendall got about 8 or 9 of us together to see if we could save it. And so we went to the park department and talked to them, and they didn't really want to, but we told them we'd try to raise money, which we did, and they ended up giving us some money too. Anyway, the bottom 3 or 4 logs all need to be replaced. And so we knew of a person who had a lot of trees about that big around. So went out there and met a friend with a truck, and we cut down a whole bunch of trees and brought them over here, and we had to peel them to get the bark off. So we did that. I used to peel logs for part of my summer school job, as well as other guys. And so anyway, we peeled them. Of course, then we had to hire some guy who knew what he was doing. And to had to raise the whole thing up, and we take out all the bottom logs all the way around and replace them. And you can see how kind of hard they are to replace it in the corner. We had to put in a new floor, and inside there's another room, but there's a fireplace on the other side of this fireplace inside.
What's it used for now?
So anyway, the park department has it. It's used for funerals, weddings, parties, anything. You can rent it. Whatever you want.
Christmas market.
But it's still scouts.
Because
It's still scouts.
Scouts, yeah, scouts use it. Yeah.
Well, thank you for restoring it.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, it was worthwhile.
Been using this ever since I moved here.
Yeah. Okay, I guess we're done.